Hello and welcome to TheAIbumMan, and it is time for part 2 of my top 50 albums of 2013. And today we are going to be having a look at from number 25 to number 1. Yes, today we'll find out what TheAIbumMan's top album for 2013 is, and there's lots of great albums on the way to that. So let's kick things off with number 25, 9 Lives by Von Herzen Brothers. This is really the first Von Herzen Brothers album of the Finnish progressive rock band, which consists of 3, brothers called Von Herzen. They're a pretty appropriately titled band. And they've been known in Finland for a while, but really this is the first album, I would say, to really break them, certainly over in the UK. I don't know about the US at all, but certainly over in the UK, this is the first album people paid attention to. In fact, the best song from the album, one of the best songs of the year, probably the second best song of the year, Flowers and Rust, won an award for Best Anthem at the 2013 Prog Awards, so that was pretty cool. And I'm pleased this band is starting to get some recognition, starting to get some momentum. This album is definitely strong. As I said, Flowers and Rust, one of the catchiest, probably the catchiest song of the year. It's just so good. And then you have Coming Home, Insomniac. Really the beginning, particularly the beginning sections and the end of this album are just amazing. The middle, there's a couple of ballads that don't work as well, but this album just has so much variety, and it works very well, though it's not necessarily very proggy in the same way that other bands on this list are. It certainly has some slight progressive tendencies, but it's more just good hard rock with a little bit of prog. Number 24, Straight Out of Hell by Helloween. Helloween are really the classic mainstay band in the power metal genre, and I can criticise the power metal genre. I think at times it can be quite stale, it can be quite samey, and there's definitely a bit of stagnation going on. But I think Helloween, this album doesn't do anything innovative, it doesn't do anything out of the blue. It's just such a solid power metal album. It has those big German choruses that those German power metal bands just do better than anyone else. They really do. And not huge amounts to say, because it's just solid power metal. If you like that type of thing, you'll love this, and if you don't, you won't. I personally like Helloween a lot, so that's why it's quite high on my list. Number 23, Echoes of War by Caladan Brood. Now this, there may be an album you're like, really? Caladan Brood's on my list? And some of you will probably be like, who the bloody hell Caladan Brood? Well, this is the debut album from, I think, the American atmospheric black metal band Caladan Brood. And Echoes of War, if you're into black metal, you probably know this band, and they certainly take a lot of influence from the band The Summoning. But compared to The Summoning's album this year, Old Morning Dawn, I think this is so much superior. But basically what this is, imagine sort of the Lord of the Rings soundtrack with some sort of black metal vocals and some metal into it, and that's just so cool to me. I'm a big fan of sort of fantasy-like music and fantasy worlds. I'm very much into that type of stuff. So to have an album that really just sums up like giant open landscapes and huge, you can just imagine like whole platoons of dwarves and elves just crashing into each other to fight. And this album really provides the perfect soundtrack, and just adding that metal in it, that black metal. If you really don't like black metal vocals and you absolutely hate them, you might not like this, but still it's worth a listen, even if you don't like black metal, because I don't particularly, but this album really resonated with me. Number 22, New Horizon by The Answer. These are such a criminally underrated Irish hard rock band. Apparently this album is a bit make or break for them with its artwork, as you can see here, designed by Storm Ferguson, one of his last, if not his last, of course, rest in peace, Storm. Fantastic cover artist, probably the best. And New Horizon, I think, definitely delivers. If you know the band, then you might know albums like Everyday Demons. They supported AC/DC on their Black Ice tour, which was how they gained quite a lot of their popularity. But really, they're a band not many people pay attention to, and I've heard this is make or break. If this album doesn't do well on this tour, then they might just have to call it a day, which would be very sad. But yeah, if you like 70s style, hard rock, then this is so up your street. It's just so catchy, these songs. Nice riffs on them. Not as much solos on this, not as many solos even on this album as something like Everyday Demons. Everyday Demons is their best. Demon Eyes is just a monster of a hard rock song. An absolute monster of a song. But here, there's still some great songs. It's definitely worth checking out. Number 21, Vertical by Cult of Luna. Now, this is a band I only discovered this year, but they're a band who's certainly been going for quite a while. And this is a very interesting. So this is I think the first, or there's certainly a few post-metal releases on this list, getting higher up. And oh, this album is so fantastic. It sort of almost has a slight concept to it based on the I think 30s, 20s film Metropolis, and it has this whole sort of machinery and repetition and very industrial feel to it. But not to say it's like industrial metal, because it's not necessarily, but it has a sort of machinery feel to it, which is really, really cool. It's a very hard atmosphere. And it's a very different, very interesting album. It's got some very long songs like Vicarious Redemption, which is like, I think, like a 15, 20-minute epic, and that song is just amazing. This, as a warning to people, yes, this album is full of harsh vocals. Most of it, probably 80%, or if not more, of the vocals are of the harsher, more growling nature, and can be a bit hard to understand at times. They're not the clearest of growling vocals, which is, again, it's something I'm not usually a fan of, unless it is backed up by great music. And music isn't just all like death metal blast beats. That type of stuff just bores me, honestly. But this has some such interesting music. Again, like a lot of post-metal releases, it just has, but this does it better than a lot I've heard. Just the light and shade from seriously beautiful, serene moments to the crushingly heavy. And this album is just fantastic at that, it really is. Number 20, Rhythm and Blues by Buddy Guy. Buddy Guy is a legend of blues. Him and, B.B. King particularly are probably the greatest living bluesman, classic bluesman around. And certainly Buddy Guy in this ambitious double album, one side rhythm, one side blues. The rhythm having some horn elements, sort of very 50s sound to it, and then the blues album having more of a modern blues feel to it, yet still with those sort of retro lyrics, those retro 12-bar blues behind it. Though, I mean, the thing is that Buddy Guy performs this with an energy. I mean, considering these, at least in his late 70s, early 80s, this guy is no spring chicken, but yet he delivers these songs with such a passion, such a furious, energetic, frenetic nature that it's just almost unparalleled in the blues world still. I mean, when you're looking at someone like Eric Clapton, who's younger than Buddy Guy, but yet delivering these slow, very safe, pretty dull albums, Buddy Guy's still going for roaring guitar solos, catchy choruses, just great all-out blues. If you like blues, you can't afford to miss this release. In my opinion, it is the blues album of 2013. Not something to be missed. Number 19, The Inheritance by Riverscape. Now, when I first heard about this project by Dan Swano, I assumed really it'd just be a bit of an Opeth clone by what I'd read about it. I thought, okay, it might be kind of good, but it'd probably just be an Opeth clone. And well, certainly Riverscape and this album, I think it's the debut album for Riverscape, I'm not sure. It's mostly a one-man project. I think it's mostly Dan Swano, really. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know a huge amount about the band. But it certainly does take some influence. You can see a lot of Blackwater Park, Ghost Reveries type stuff, etc. in there. But it really just adds this sort of, it's hard to describe, but it certainly has a slightly unique feel to it. It's certainly an interesting album, keeps you engaged, and it really just, it's a nice throwback to sort of older Opeth, but Dan Swano definitely adds his own twist on it. His vocals, I would say, quite different to Mike Ackerfeld's. Not hugely, but I'd say, his cleans are really good, his growls are great. It's just some nice sort of progressive death metal. If that's your type of thing, this is definitely one of the better releases of the year for that genre. Number 18, New Generation Slaves by Riverside. Now, this is another one of those bands that have been going for quite a while, but I only heard about this year. New Generation Slaves has been quite a big album in the prog world this year, I'd say. Riverside have really made some roads in the UK and the US. Mainly, probably, maybe more the UK. But with the single like Celebrity Touch, which really just, I think, encapsulates this band, combining sort of, you know, nice choruses, but also just a lot of prog. This band, prog rock, verging on prog metal at times, but I'd still say more prog rock. And again, they do what should be done in this 70s sort of prog revival. They take those elements of 70s prog, but instead of just being a clone of Genesis or a clone of Yes, you know, etc., they really just add a modern flair to it. They add their own twist, their own turns, and they just create something really quite unique. It reminds me a bit almost of Beardfish at times as well, that type of thing, especially more Beardfish's later work, like Into the Void. And yeah, it's such a good prog album. If you don't know this band, yeah, I'd say definitely you're missing out. Number 17. El Pistolero by Tracer, and I'm lucky enough to have a nice signed copy here by the band, which is cool, because where I went to see them live as they were supporting The Answer, of course, earlier on this list. But yes, El Pistolero, I think this is their second or third album from the Australian hard rock band, and yeah, it sort of has a slight concept to it with the Desperado Suite, which is a 4-part suite, which includes songs El Pistolero, Ballad of El Pistolero, Santa Cecilia, and Until the War is Won. And I'd say the Desperado Suite is spread along throughout the album, and I'd say that's probably the highlight, that's probably the thing you remember the most about the album. It's a very interesting suite, but this band, they just, I mean, they're one of those bands, live, they're a bit better, than in the studio, because they just have such an energy to them. But still here, it's just raw, aggressive, energetic. You can tell they just have such a passion for the music they're making. And, you know, I always like to see that in a hard rock band. It's just balls to the wall, hard rock and roll, and what's there not to love? Number 16. This was a huge surprise for me. There's been bigger surprises this year, which we'll come to bit later, but this was certainly one of the biggest. Like Clockwork by Queens of the Stone Age. Now, you might say, well, why is it that much of a surprise? You know, many people put this in their list, many people rated this album very highly. I don't like Queens of the Stone Age. I think Songs for the Deaf is probably one of the most overrated albums of the 2000s. I don't quite get all the hype behind it. I think there's a couple of singles that are decent on it, but I think in general it can be a bit samey at times. It's not hugely interesting. It's okay. And then I've heard bits from Rated R and Era Vulgaris, and I've tried so many times with this band, I've just never liked them. I've just completely written them off, honestly. But I was just hearing so many good things about Like Clockwork, I thought, okay, I'll look at the single. So I went onto YouTube, typed in, you know, Queen's Stage Like Clockwork, and found I Appear Missing. And this is, bear in mind, this is the single, this is the cut version of the music video. And I listened to that cut version, and it was just like, oh my god, this is such a good song. This really is. And then I had the full, like, 5-6 minute version, and I was just, like, absolutely blown away. I Appear Missing is the song of 2013 for me. It's so great. The little guitar riffs, the way it builds and falls, and oh, it's just an absolute modern masterpiece in songwriting. And the thing is, the rest of the album is no slouch as well, with songs like the single My God Is the Sun. I mean, that's just really quite a fast, furious song. I feel there's a bit more doom on here than maybe some of Queens of the Stone Age other albums. This has a bit more of that, you know, chaos vibe to it, which is really cool, because I far prefer chaos to Queens of the Stone Age. But yeah, this album has restored my faith in the band. It's, yeah, definitely, I really want to see what they do next, because I think Josh Homme and co have created the album of their career by far, and something truly special. Number 15, Diving Board by Elton John. I was looking forward to this album. It's been a long time since we had Captain and the Kid. Well, not that long. It's been a while. Maybe 2007 was that album. And to me, Captain and the Kid is one of Elton John's best. I'd honestly say it's probably at the moment my second favourite Elton John album, with of course Goodbye Yellow Brick Road being my favourite. Now, Elton John, he's been a big influence in my musical development over the years. He was one of the first artists I really got into, and I've always had such a soft spot and such a love for Elton John. His Greatest Hits was one of the first CDs I had, really, as sort of the white one, you know. and I've just listened to that so many, countless times. And Diving Board, I was honestly expecting a continuation of Captain the Kid. I was expecting, some sort of, having the full bands behind him, some catchy choruses, big songs, but instead we don't get that with the Diving Board. And when I heard that this song, it was stripped back, there was no band, no Davy Jones or whatever he's called, I always forget his name, no big choruses, no big power ballads or anything, just more mature, stripped back. I was thinking, okay, interesting. Let's went in with an open mind, and yeah, this album. I wouldn't say it's as good as Captain the Kid. This album is fantastic. It really is. With songs like Oceans Away, the Oscar Wilde song, and the title track Diving Board as well. There's also some instrumental preludes and stuff. There's a couple of piano solos. You don't often get real piano solos from Elton John, but there's definitely one or two sprinkled in here. And yet it shows a more mature songwriting by him. It's stripped back, it's just him and his piano with Bernie Taupin's fantastic lyrics, sort of reminiscing. It's a very nostalgic album, I'd say. It's looking back at the earlier days of his career and just looking back as someone older. And I think it's a very interesting, very reflective, very deep and emotion-filled album, honestly. I think it's one of the more interesting of his, sort of latter Renaissance career. I can't remember the album, but yeah, it's sort of Renaissance career. And very, very interesting album. If you're not an Elton John fan, you're probably not going to find anything here you particularly like, It's not one of those albums you have to give a couple of listens. It's a bit of a grower. At first you might think, it's decent, but for a couple of listens it really does grow, and you just have to give it that chance. Number 14. Heavy metal music by Newsted. I wasn't expecting this to be that good, honestly. I thought it might, just scrape top 50. Even though I didn't think when I had this album I was going to do a top 50, but, I certainly didn't think this would be top 15. Newsted, of course, the bassist for Metallica, during Justice for All, the Black Album, and Load and Reload. They're more, they're mid-period and slightly, controversial at times. The Black Album, people, some not being too keen. Me personally, I love the Black Album. I think it's probably the second best. Reloads and Loads, very mixed bag. And of course his non-existent bass work on Injustice for All. He's been a bit mistreated, I always felt, over the years with Metallica, but I felt when he was allowed to shine, he was truly a very talented bassist, so it's very interesting to see what he'd do on his own. And here, he does something great on his own. Basically, heavy metal music, really, it's, as the title describes it, it's basically 80s heavy metal music with some sort of thrash elements. I wouldn't call it all out thrash, but it certainly, has thrash influence to it, but it sort of reminds me very much of that new wave British heavy metal. I definitely get vibes of bands like Saxon and Samson and things like that on this album, which is really cool. It's very retro, it's very old school metal, there's nothing hugely complex, but it's just good old-fashioned metal. It's definitely one of the best of that type of releases of the year, though. Just above it, there's one I think is very slightly better. But yeah, definitely surprised. Newsted's vocals as well, quite surprisingly good. Really are quite surprisingly good. I wasn't quite expecting that. But yeah, just such a solid album. But number 13, Sacrifice by Saxon. I love Saxon, I really do. I think the last few years they've just been great. Call to Arms was a wonderful album, and Sacrifice is probably about equal in my estimation. I just think they've just getting on a string of albums that really is rivaling the classic period. The Wheels of Steels and God, I'm just completely mind farting when it comes to Saxon albums now, but you know what I mean. I'm sure a lot of you are Saxon fans out there, and I certainly am. I went to see them live on this album. The songs live are great, but it's just such strong. There really isn't a weak song on this album. And even though some of the lyrics, there's the Standing in the Queue song, which seems to be about just standing in a queue, and it's like, how you can make an interesting and great, catchy song out of this, I don't know, but you do it, Biff. So, well done. And even though the lyrics at times are, a bit predictable, a bit, it's Saxon. We don't expect huge depth, but still, what we do expect, we expect big riffs, big anthemic choruses, and we get that here. We just get solid, proper metal. And it's nice to have a good release like that, and it's been a release I've been enjoying, been on rotation throughout the year, and just something I always feel I can really go back to. Number 12, Dawning by Mouth of the Architect. Now this is a very interesting release to me. Another band, I mean, post-metal really is quite new to me. I've only got into it the last couple of months, really. But Mouth of the Architect, to me, this album really stood out with Dawning. I just love this album. I really want to get hold of this. I'm sick of listening to it on Spotify, but I've been listening to it a few times, and I've just been enjoying it so much. I just can't stop listening to tracks like Lullaby particularly. I just love that song. It really is, it's just, again, it just encapsulates that band so well. Again, a bit like Cult of Luna, they go from these lighter moments to these heavier moments, but yeah, they have a very different feel to Cult of Luna, they really do, but it's that type of thing in the vaguest, most inaccurate sense, I suppose. To talk about this in detail, it'd take longer than a 2-minute segment on a top 50, the top 50 list. But the best I can say is, yeah, I mean, okay, again, warning, there are harsher vocals on here. If you don't like harsher vocals, then you may not like this. But they're not too difficult to understand, honestly. You can definitely hear, I would say, what's being sung, which is always nice. But yeah, then they have some surprisingly nice choruses on here, which is kind of unexpected. So yeah, very interesting album. Also, just like barely a guitar solo on here. I mean, it's quite, got some long songs, but none of the songs drag. They're all like 7 to 9 minutes, and there's not really many guitar solos, but I don't know, yet they managed to keep it fresh and interesting. It's quite an amazing album. Number 11, just outside the top 10, but definitely one of the best hard rock releases of the year, of course. We have to have some Mike Portnoy on this list. I mean, we just have to. There was like 2 Mike Portnoy albums on the list last time, with Flying Colours, which amazing, and Adrenaline Mob, which is a bit lower, but I still like that album. And I'm sure next year Transatlantic's Kaleidoscope will be on my list. I'm a big Transatlantic fan. I hope it's good. But Winery Dog's self-titled new album, Mike Portnoy, Richie Kotzen, Billy Sheehan, and bloody hell, what a hard rock album. I didn't really know Richie Kotzen or Billy Sheehan. I had no idea who the bloody hell they were before this project, but now I certainly do. Richie Kotzen, I believe, was in Poison for a while, but he's mainly famous for, well, not famous, but he's mainly known for his solo career. And Billy Sheehan has, I think, played in Mr. Big and a couple of other bands. He's sort of one of those bassists for hire almost, he switches between things. But this project, there's just so much chemistry. I think this is probably Mike Portnoy's best drumming performance since maybe Black Clouds and Silver Lining of Dream Theater, honestly. I love the drumming on here. He really takes that lead, even though he's only playing like 5-kit John Bonham drum kit, he really takes that Bonham Moon approach, plays the drums almost like a lead instrument. I mean, the drums are just as melodic as any of the big choruses that Kotzen's delivering in his guitar playing. The thing about this, all 3 of the musicians get to shine at one point or another on the song, if not all in the same song. You get a bass solo here, you get a drum solo here, a big guitar solo here, and then they all come together for the big choruses. And it really takes that standard hard rock formula, but it just adds that almost, I wouldn't say prog because it's not a prog release, but it adds that progressive rock sort of technicality and skill to it. Which makes this one of the most engaging hard rock albums of the year, honestly. If you didn't know Winery Dogs, you need to listen to them. You really do.